Okay, I can share. I'll just, yes, you absolutely. Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we are covering using AI to help manage your community, plus legal safeguards to stay compliant. So our speakers today, we have three very knowledgeable people. Taha Jamal is our sales engineer at Condo Control. Brian Bosher is the CEO of Condo Control, and Kevin Herzl is the managing member at Herzl Law. Together, they will be able to answer all of your questions about AI, about community management, and about legal complications when you combine those things. And my name's Kim Brown. I'm the senior content writer here, and I will be taking you through this. So just a few housekeeping rules. The webinar is being recorded. A follow-up email will be sent to all registrants with the recording once the link becomes available. Please use the Q&A functionality at the bottom of your screen. So please do feel free to enter questions at any time. We'll be taking some pauses to answer those, but don't use the chat function. Everyone is muted, so we will just be looking through the Q&A section to answer questions. And after the webinar, a Zoom survey will open in your browser. We would greatly appreciate any feedback that you have to offer so we can improve for the next one. What we're covering. So we're going to be going through why your community should be using AI right now. Hopefully you're attending because you're interested or you're already using it. Some possibilities. So how are community associations currently using it, and how might that evolve in the future? We'll be taking, a little look into what it can do. And we are also going to show you a demo of AI chat, which is designed by Condo Control. We're going to be looking at some limitations then, kind of getting more into the legal issues, good and not so good ways to use it, some best practices, and some legal issues that we should bring to your attention. And then at the end, if there's time, we'll also be looking at a Condo Control roadmap update to show you what's coming next. And at the very end, we will take your questions. So why should your community be using AI right now? AI isn't going anywhere. I know you probably hear it every day. AI is doing this and that. It might seem ubiquitous, novel, but eventually it will be ubiquitous. It's going to be everywhere, just like cell phones. AI is still in its infancy, so this is a good time to start exploring its capabilities and limitations because the learning curve is low right now. It's only going to get harder as it is easy to use, mind you, but the sophistication will become more complex. So this is a good time to get into it. AI has already demonstrated that it can save communities time and money. Just a quick fact here, the CAI shared data collected by a property management company. They started using a chatbot, and after 6 months, they found a 70% reduction in routine inquiries from people to staff. So that's a lot of time they saved. A similar case study, another company implemented some sensors and AI for HVAC systems, and they reduced emergency costs by 12%. So there are real benefits to using this. And finally, the communities that can get comfortable with it now will enjoy the benefits sooner, and you'll have an easier time adapting. So how are communities using it right now? Communication is the main use. You think about chatbots and natural language processing systems like ChatGPT, things to help you draft emails or letters and scheduling appointments. For us, Condo Control has AI chat. So this is our newest addition. We're very proud of it. It is a natural language processing system capable of answering questions for residents and staff. It's simple It's very easy to use, and you're like, oh yeah, that is absolutely something that my community could use. It pulls information from your file library, so it doesn't make up answers. It only uses what is available, and it cites its sources as well, so residents can go and see where the information was pulled from. How does it make community living better? So it alleviates pressure off of the board and property management team, who are always bombarded with questions from residents. It provides accurate, rapid responses to staff and residents. So yeah, no hallucinations, nothing that is false or misleading. When there are no direct results available, it will either look for articles available to the search, or it may direct the user to contact the manager. And it encourages maintenance to keep, or sorry, encourages management, or if you're a self-managed community, the board, to keep your documents up to date so that the most correct and accurate answers are always available to residents. Okay, so we'd love to know if you are currently using AI to manage your community association. So please do feel free to put your answers in there. All right, so it's looking right now like a lot of you are not, which is completely fine. I'm glad you're attending, but interested in getting started. A couple more seconds here. Okay, and we can end the poll. So the majority not using but interested, which is great to see. Some people are not interested, which is completely fine as well. And some of you are using AI for communication tasks already, but very few for more advanced applications like financial or maintenance issues. Okay. So where is AI headed? And this is where I'm going to pass it over to Brian, who will share more.
Okay, thanks, Kim, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. As Kim said, I'm Brian Bosher, the CEO of Condo Control. So this question, where is AI headed, both broadly and more specifically for our industry, property management, condos, HOAs. So broadly, as you know, AI generally continues to improve. There's really two categories of software. There's sort of your large language models like a ChatGPT or Claude or Google's Gemini, and we can definitely see the improvement month over month where the systems get better and faster and are better able to answer your questions. The other area where you start to see it is in vertical specific software, in software like Condo Control, others in our industry, as well as other software verticals like sales and Salesforce and other companies like that. So our team has increasingly been using AI ourselves for day to day, and we're seeing the benefits as well. So we're starting to think through how is Condo Control going to implement AI and what is our solution going to look like. So I'm going to walk you through a bit of that. And if you have questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A, and we're going to pause at the end of this next segment to answer your questions. So if we can go to the next slide. So we've broken this down into two parts here. The first is on the resident side. So there are, at this point now, we're a couple years into really robust AI solutions. And so we now have proven use cases that are really good for creating better experiences. So I've highlighted three of those here, and this is sort of the direction we're planning on going with Condo Control. Subject, of course, to our customers' feedback and input on this. The first area and the place that you're going to see a demo of this shortly, is the ability to give instant self-serve answers. So rather than having to search through documents or construct a query that may or may not give you a match, we're planning to introduce the ability to ask questions and then receive instant answers from your condo or association's documents based on all of the information that is hosted in your file library. This is really the most obvious solution. It's something that just takes information that you've already organized, makes it available, and makes it easy for people to get that information rather than having to ask a board member, ask a property manager. They can get the information themselves. The second example for residents that we're thinking through is maintenance request submission. So if a problem can't be resolved through AI and we understand that it's a question that's going to need essentially a service request, that request can be created from the chat rather than the person having to fill out a specific form. And then the third example here is I've called it conversational actions. And so this is a similar concept where rather than having to do it through a form, you could have the ability to, for example, book a tennis court through chat rather than having to do forms. So these are some of the experiences we're planning on the resident side. So the next question is, how about for property managers and staff, people who are running your communities? How are we going to help make their jobs easier? So we've got a couple of things to share here. So the first one is very similar to the resident side, asking questions and getting instant answers. This is going to be very much like the we just spoke about for residents, except it now has access to more information. So you've got board meeting minutes, for example, budgets, all of those things can be searched and the content used to give answers to the management and staff. And as you can imagine, a lot of times you might know there is a certain document or you remember thinking about it or talking about it at some point, and it's not always easy to retrieve that information. This makes that retrieval much easier. The second one I want to talk about here is auto drafting responses. So this is the ability to automatically create draft replies to service requests, violations. It's sort of it's halfway between writing an answer and using a template response. This is a hybrid of that where you could use AI to draft you a reply that could be based on both the comment history, documents from the file library, and then other prior responses that you might have flagged as suitable for training materials for AI. The third example, also not creative, but completely useful, drafting announcements. So being able to provide a prompt and then the system can draft an announcement for you. So similar to templates, but again, a little bit more tailored based on some of the details you might give it. The last two things I want to comment on here that are important and that we have to think about as we're building out these capabilities. First one is training and data management. So as an administrator of condo control, you need to be able to specify what information is used and in what scenarios. And then you need to be able to provide feedback on those responses to help the system improve its accuracy. So those are some really important pieces of building an AI-enabled product. It's not super helpful if it's using the wrong information or it's giving bad answers and you aren't able to provide feedback. So we need to build a mechanism into the system for this. And last, privacy and security. This is sort of core to everything we do. So all of these features that we're going to be building out will be built to respect the existing permission sets. And so using file library or service requests as an example, you will, as an owner, I will only have access to certain information, while a board member or a tenant or a property manager will have access to a different range of information. And it's really important that as we build these features, everything takes those permission sets into consideration, and you're never sharing or using information that's not intended for the specific audience. So that's sort of a roadmap for where condo control is going with AI. We, as you all know, those who've been our customers for a while know that we base our roadmap and our planning on customer feedback. So if you have ideas, suggestions, we're very open to those. So I am going to pause there, Kim, and I think we're going to look at questions and see what we've got so far in our Q&A.
Okay, let's take a look. So how how do you suggest we get started using AI?
Yeah, so I'm going to pause that one. I'm going to say that will be answered later. I think Kevin's going to have some ideas there about client experiences and things that you can use. Next one here, can AI be used to send out quarterly letters to all the owners? Absolutely. I mean, it would depend on what the content is. I think you need to, if it's just generating a static letter that's the same for everybody, that's very much something you could use AI for. If you're going to try and do a merge of that, that's going to be a little bit more work. Next one here, I have a question that says how to access Condo Control chat. It's coming soon, so it's not yet available. We're just in the process of finalizing and building it out. And once that is available, you will get further communication from us on how that's going to work.
Until then, you're gonna have to use Kevin GPT. So, but it'll be there soon, right, Brian?
Yeah, you're still, yeah, exactly. Next up, David here is asking, how are you using AI for both financial and maintenance? And did I hear you say someone's using sensors for HVAC? So these are concepts that we've talked to people. People are using, they're exploring. We are not yet building out any of these things in our product, so it's a coming soon. And question here: what are the safeguards for protecting sensitive information? It's a great question. So in the condo control context, I think it comes down to what I just spoke about here about privacy and security. So the file library, as an example, and the permissions that are set up in your file library, it's very important that you've set those so that you've actively selected which documents, which folders are going to be accessible to which users, and that you've given some thought to that, and you're not uploading, say, legal letter for a particular unit into a folder that's visible to all of your residents. So that's how we are handling those types of permissions.
So I think one thing that's pretty unique, at least about your product that I've seen, is that you do have that closed source option. So that's something I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. But it's much different than if you were to go out and use ChatGPT and that information is available to everybody. They're using it to learn. Whereas with this product, you have the ability to make it closed source and protect that information.
Yep, great point. Thank you for a great, very, very important. Yeah. And last question here, and then we're going to pause and move on, and then we'll come back to more questions later. The question here from Linda: do file library documents have to be in a specific format for AI to read or interpret them? Great question. So the answer is sort of. The best results are going to be either a PDF that has the text in the file. It's not like a scan of an image, or Word documents, Excel documents, things like that. Our intention is to be able to apply OCR or text recognition to scanned PDFs, because I know for example, lots of originating condo documents like a declaration or bylaws, they could be very old. They could be originals that were scanned into a PDF. So the ability to read that text, I think, is very important. So we're working on that as part of the solution. If your property is newer and you have that in a sort of original PDF format, then it'll read it just fine. So let's pause there, and we'll definitely have more time for questions at the end. But for now, I'm going to pass it back to Kim.
Thank you so much, Brian. All right, so moment you've all been waiting for. We're going to show you a demo. And again, the AI chat is coming later this year. We're just putting the polishing touches on it. But Taha is going to take us through what it will look like.
Good morning, all, and thank you so much for joining us. So what you see on my screen right now is the condo control portal, or from a resident's perspective. When they log in, this is what they see. This is how it's all laid out. Today, we're going to be demoing the File Library AI chat, where residents can basically go in and they'll be able to see documents that they've been given permission to. So, like Brian mentioned, within Condo Control, you have the ability of creating certain folders and giving different access levels to different people. So when you go into the AI chat, it will be pulling information from those documents. So I could have a simple question such as, what are the timings for my pool? Just as an example. And it will look for the documents that the resident has permissions to, and will pull the information from there. It is a closed system, so it will also provide you with references on where it got that information from, so you can see those specific items. Let's say there were certain bylaws. Can I have pets, as an example? And it will then pull the specific bylaw from the document to provide it to the resident, so you don't no longer need to field those questions on what is this information or that. And that typically is about 25 to 30% of the calls that PMs get from their residents, right? Now, Kevin asked a pretty fun question yesterday. Can I have an emotional support?
Well, you started with, can I have a snake? And so it answered correctly, and it did a fantastic job. There's no snakes allowed here. And then we amped it up about whether you can have an emotional support snake. And I did not make this up. It came from a real case, so let's see what it does with it, Taha.
Absolutely. So, like Kevin mentioned, we'll go through that same flow. Can I have a snake? It basically defines which pets are defined as snakes based on the documentation that is provided, and then let's say emotional support animal. There we go, and it will again pull the data from your documents. And can I have an emotional support both? And let's see what it says. If it's able to find the information, great, it will give you exactly that. However, if it's not able to find the information, it will tell you, hey, this is what I can help you with. And if, let's say, it's anything beyond that, please reach out to your property managers. So what I'm trying to say is it doesn't try to assume what you're asking for. It tries to look for the information that is provided by management or the community and stays within that realm, right? It doesn't become your lawyer. Could it be that Kevin would answer, but it doesn't become your PM. Okay.
So, I mean, the interesting thing is if you went on to ChatGPT and just put this on there, it'd probably just give you the wrong answer, is what I've done, in my experience. I think this is awesome, because instead of hallucinating, it basically said, like, you need to follow up. I wasn't able to find the correct answer based on all the information that I had, which makes it a lot, more trustworthy and easier to rely on.
Absolutely. And coming back to what Brian said, essentially it's a closed system. So it will only feed off of the information that you've given it access to. And secondly, nobody from off the street can log into your portal and get this information, which basically speaks to security as well, right? All right. With that being said, that's pretty much it for me. I will pass it back to Kim.
Thank you so much, Taha. I appreciate that. Okay, so time for another poll. What, if any, concerns do you have when it comes to using AI for community management? So we'd love to hear what you feel about that. I'm getting some pretty even answers here, but it looks like we don't think owners will use it is probably one of the main concerns, which is valid. The great thing about AI is it is designed to be very user-friendly, and adoption rates will likely prove to be higher than normal.
Yeah, and I think another comment, I'll wait for the results here, but the ease of use, I think, is really important. So as we're thinking about adding AI capabilities, we're going to be adding them both from web experience, from mobile, may be able to add it by text message. So there's a lot of different ways that you could have residents access the same experience. We have all our votes yet?
I think so. Pretty much everything. Yep, we can end the poll. So leading out, not just completely confident that owners will use it, followed by we're concerned about additional costs. Brian, do you think, is adding AI tools a significant expense?
I don't think so. I think we're still working through because obviously there's going to be back-end cost for us as well as we implement this. But it's one of those things where the goal is to get it out there and to get as many of our customers using it as possible. So the intention is, to keep it affordable. Nice.
Get into now some of the things you should be aware of. Definitely use it. Knowledge is power. So this segment isn't to scare you away from it. It's to inform you so that you know what not to do when implementing AI. And this is where I will pass it over to Kevin.
Sure. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about generally what are going to be the safe ways and maybe some ways you should be cautious about using it and guardrails that you can put on there. I'm going to talk about potential liability issues, associated with that, and maybe give you a few different use cases as to how you can probably at least safely start experimenting with this in other areas where you probably don't want to start experimenting with this as well. So for examples of safe uses here, the first thing you really need to ask yourself before you're using any AI, is this open source or closed source? And it may not be that easy because some programs can be both. So for example, in our office, we use Grammarly as one of the AI tools that we use. But the free version of Grammarly is open source and the data gets out there. But the enterprise version, which you pay for, is closed source. So there's no learning. Everything is in a closed environment and there's no risk of that getting out. So no matter what kind of AI tool that you're using, you need to figure out whether it's open source or closed source to at least know what you're dealing with. And so you also need to take a look at what you're going to be putting into this. So on the safe use case list that I created here, there's certain information. It's probably going to be put out on your website. It's going to be given to all the owners. This is not going to be secret. It's not going to be confidential. And there really is a low risk of AI getting it wrong. So for example, in addition to being an HOA lawyer, I just can't get enough of community associations. So I'm an HOA board president myself too. But doing things like creating an agenda for our board meeting, that's something that's going to turn into meeting minutes eventually. I'd probably black out if we were talking about a specific owner, something that needed to be in closed session, and you could just denote closed session on there and not put those details in the agenda, but trying to organize things, keep things organized and have it spit out what could be a meeting agenda would certainly be a low risk use, generally speaking, in my opinion. Seen a lot of people start using Otter.ai, Fireflies, different things to actually record meetings. So that can help you transcribe meeting minutes, being able to go back. Instead of in the old days when I first started, you'd argue about what was said during the meeting and whether that went into the meeting minutes or not. That would certainly be something that could be a safe use case. You do have to be aware, though, if you adopt that and somebody makes a record request, they'd be able to have access to that information. But it will certainly help improve probably the ease of generating meeting minutes and the accuracy of them. Because I can tell you that there's no board member I've ever met that's raised their hand and says, I love taking meeting minutes and I love doing it by hand and then typing it up, afterwards. Finding vendors. I will tell you that probably this year in the last, probably couple months, we get a couple calls a week, and we always ask how people find us, and they will say ChatGPT. So people are going, I think that's an acceptable use. Going on, asking questions about, who may be out there, in my locale. It's not going to be that much different than doing the Google research, talking to your property manager about their use. But that will even allow you to compare and contrast based on information that's publicly available. And it will do a great job of creating charts, compared to different companies and maybe what their service offerings are, pricing, if that kind of thing is available. Finding information in governing documents. So that was one of the use cases that we had talked about earlier. And that's certainly, those documents are already a matter of public record. So I would, borrow a line from Ronald Reagan here and say, trust but verify. And so once it spits out that answer and gives you the source, I would still go that extra step and look it up and make sure it says exactly that. There's been a lot of court cases and things recently that have come out where it's maybe cited something that wasn't, necessarily there. And I think that is something that's going to get better with AI over time. But even just being able to do that initial step of finding it should be something that should save you a lot of time. Using AI as a strategic thought partner. If you go into ChatGPT and say, my association is having these, different issues, without putting confidential information in, what do you recommend, or what issues should we tackle first, in terms of prioritizing issues, that will certainly, be a use case for that as well. And as long as you're not putting, confidential information, it's a great sounding board to help you organize your ideas, I found. Creating budgets, that's also something. You'll still want to check the budget, the math, everything at the end. But if you were to feed it and basically say, we need to create a budget from all these different costs, or we're anticipating these kinds of things, certainly there for that. And I would say, editing the non-confidential communications or doing the initial draft. Keep in mind that, the way that you need to view this is that this would be, a secretary, an administrative assistant, doing that kind of initial draft. But you, as the board member, the property manager, you're ultimately responsible for the outcome. And what, gets put in is also, garbage in, garbage out. If you put good stuff in, you're going to get good stuff out. So still, it's not, a license to just say, I put this in and hit send. You still want to check it at this point, but it can 100% save you time doing that initial draft. And it will continue to improve over time. But I think that's another potential safe use case. What I deem to be more dangerous or risky use cases where I can see you getting into trouble, things like approving modification requests. For example, a lot of documents will have discretionary items there. If you approve something that is not allowed, by the documents, you're going to be on the hook for that as a director. Providing legal opinions, and I'll go through, a few questions that I've asked and sort of how that has ended up. But for example, in what Taha put out there, AI was able to tell you that it didn't have the answer based on the documents and you should ask more, but it's probably not going to be able to go and give you a complete legal analysis as we sit here today, maybe 3, 4, 5 years from now. And I know there's companies that are working on that, but I wouldn't rely on it for that. And we're going to get into the reasons based on the fiduciary duty. Drafting and amending legal documents. I'm going to kind of go over, things that I've tried to test out for that to work. It will do it and it will spit something out for you, but there's going to be a lot of errors on it. Drafting, rules, drafting, trying to play lawyer, drafting pleadings, those things, it's just not there yet and capable of doing that without a fair number of errors. And the last thing you want to be careful of is there was a recent lawsuit about hiring employees. And I know one thing I'm going to talk about is there's laws developing about whether you use AI and whether there is potential claims for discrimination when you're, hiring employees and making employment decisions and actually having to disclose that. So this is, generally where I think we're at in the world. It's going to continue to evolve and develop. But my advice, I wouldn't use it for anything on the right side here in the dangerous use cases just yet. The safe use cases are probably going to be areas that you're going to be able to start experimenting with not a high degree of risk. So as far as assisting, with HOA legal matters, I can tell you, I've even, asked, ChatGPT whether it can give me legal advice. It will readily admit it's not qualified to do that. You should still consult a lawyer. So it'd be the same thing if somebody came to me and I'm a condo and HOA lawyer and asked, can you handle my personal injury matter? I'd probably tell them I'm not qualified to do that, and they would go away. Or I'd refer them, to somebody that could appropriately handle that. So it will give you an answer if you ask, but the question is whether it's going to be a quality answer that you can rely on. So just know that it's not a licensed attorney. It can't give you, very specific legal advice. Anything you put in there is not going to be privileged or confidential. And so you may be able to ask it, general questions, but I would say that that's not going to be a reliable source of information when relying, on that and trying to fulfill your fiduciary duty at this point in time. All right, so here's just this next slide. It's based on a blog article that I was a little bit nervous about my job security when ChatGPT first came out, and so I wrote a blog article and I tried to do a lot of different test cases to figure out, I guess how good it was at replacing me. So, for example, one of the things, and it's pretty much form-based, is drafting, a lien, for unpaid assessments, and so. I basically said, this is a Michigan Condominium Association. This owner owns, X amount of assessments. Please draft me a lien that I could record. And it did draft something, and I would probably say it was about 75% correct. But if I did take that, I wouldn't be able to record it in the Register of Deeds. It didn't have the right, formatting requirements. It was actually, even though I asked it to draft it in compliance with the Michigan Condominium Act, it was missing language as a result of that. And so it will certainly spit something out, but the quality of that, once again, I think that this will eventually evolve, and it may be able to get to that point and in a closed source environment, but I haven't seen anything that is able to do that as we sit here today. Legal research, fictional cases, hallucinations. I asked it, basically to give me a list of cases, to help me draft a legal opinion. And I did get a list of cases on the legal opinion. I think probably about 75% of them did not exist whatsoever. The other 2 or 3 that actually existed were on a completely different topic. Than what, and I had asked it about. And I can tell you that this is dangerous because there are lawyers that are out there that are using this. They're putting this into pleadings. There's a whole host of them that have been sanctioned around the country as a result of making up cases and not verifying this. I even read last week, there was a trial court that had put fake cases that were generated from AI into an order, and that was appealed, and the Court of Appeals had to overturn that. And it was a scenario where the attorney had put it in there, the court didn't review it. You just copied and pasted and assumed that it was valid authority. So at least, from that perspective, I mean, that can get you into, serious trouble if you're trying to use that as far as, getting a case dismissed, the attorney getting sanctioned, a party getting sanctioned. So I would be real careful about that. And like I said, trust but verify is really the key here, because if you're using legal research software, that will be able to tell you whether that's actually a legitimate case or not. And so I would not really recommend it for that particular use. And even, doing something as simple as writing a blog. I gave it like a legitimate case, a case citation, and this was a fair housing case on whether people could have emotional support chickens, and in fact, whether they could have up to 6 emotional support chickens. And it gave me a nice blog article about an employment law issue. And so, that's where I would say, you have to be careful with it. And if you know that what it's spitting out and are able to identify that something is not right, you still have to at least have that base knowledge. Where it gets dangerous is if you don't know whether what it's spitting out is correct or not, and that can really lead you down the wrong path. So for potential AI liability issues, the 4 main areas that you should be thinking about if you are going to be starting to use AI that I want to talk about is the fiduciary duty of the board members, and what information they can rely on to make decisions, the privacy issues, the open source versus closed source, which we've touched on a little bit, potential discrimination claims that could be baked into AI, and some changing laws on that. And then the other biggie here is going to be insurance coverage, and how that's evolving and responding to AI. So on the first one, for fiduciary duty here, no matter what jurisdiction you're in, every member of the board of directors, they have an obligation, a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of the association. They have to, do research, and make, a decision based on, the knowledge that they obtain. Most state statutes, they are going to have an exemption to the business judgment rule or some sort of statutory exception that say if you rely on the advice of an expert, even if you get it wrong, you're not going to be liable for that if you went to the expert, whether that's an engineer, an accountant, a lawyer, any of those types of things. And you're going to be safe and you're not going to be liable because, your volunteer directors, we don't necessarily expect you to get it right, but we do expect you to go and talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. And as long as you do that, you're going to have protection. Where it gets dangerous is I will see, a lot of associations say, well, I'd like to cut costs. We don't need, to have this information. We'll just look it up on the internet. That I don't think is going to qualify as expert advice. It's not going to give you that liability shield. You're not going to be able to say that we made a business judgment decision. And so if you get called on the carpet for making a decision that goes south, and your defense to that is, well, I relied on AI. I'm not aware of a court case that says that, ChatGPT or other forms of AI would qualify as an expert that you can, get that liability shield from. So when you're making these decisions, in order to fulfill your fiduciary duty, what most state statutes currently contemplate, you're still going to go get that expert advice, get some kind of an opinion, have that in your back pocket, and that's going to give you the liability shield. If you just print out your conversation with ChatGPT, the answer is probably not. So for potential AI liability issues, like I said, the big thing here is you have to know what could potentially happen with the information that you're going to put in. So never provide any kind of confidential information, bank account information, specific information related to an owner, unless you absolutely know that it is closed source, and you can confirm that. If not, that information may get out there, and then if there's some sort of, issue with that, you could have potential liability for that. So I think that's the biggest thing when you're using AI, is to figure out first, is this open source, closed sourced, or if it's kind of like Grammarly, how I described, knowing which version that you're using, because that can also have, a big impact. And what Condo Control had talked about is you can specifically identify what's going to be closed source, which would qualify it, for a safe use. Certainly, make sure that, that the data is protected. And so that's really kind of, the big thing here, and making sure that that doesn't get out into the universe, whether it's, accidentally, or not, you're still going to have liability. And if there's a data breach, there's certain different notifications and stuff that have to go along with that as well. And so that's, really an issue that you don't want to get into. And so I can't emphasize enough, make sure if you're going to use it, for anything that has anything confidential people would want to keep private, make sure it's closed source. So for discrimination, this is probably going to be an evolving area of the law, and I will just tell you, this is one area where you have to be careful, because I don't think that AI necessarily intentionally discriminates or it's set up that way. But there has been a lawsuit, recently filed against Workday that basically says that they used AI in their hiring process and that there were biases that were baked into the AI in making hiring decisions, and that by relying on that resulted in discrimination. And so where in the context of community associations, I think, where you're going to see this come into, is number one, obviously in the employment context. And if you're hiring full-time employees, or if you're a management company, that's hiring employees. And I can tell you, for example, like in Illinois, so they have a new law that was recently passed. And so it basically says that you can't use AI in hiring decisions to discriminate. And this is going to go into effect next year. But if you do use AI, that you have to provide notice of that. And, you're going to have to put that actually on your hiring decision, or the job description when you're posting that out there. So that's an issue that I think is going to continue to evolve, because in traditional discrimination types of lawsuits, you have somebody making a conscious decision as opposed to a machine with the unconscious bias, that can get built in. One of the things I think is really interesting is that, I joke around with people a lot. AI has feelings. And what I mean by that is that if you are, nice to ChatGPT and if you are polite to it, the research shows it will give you a higher quality answer because it shows that you're operating on a different level. If you are rude to it when it kind of searches, the information, you're swearing at it and that kind of thing, it will give you a lower quality answer because in those situations, people are either stressed out or angry, or that bias is actually built into the system. So it doesn't, in reality have feelings, but that bias is baked in there. And so you need to be aware of that when you're using it because most people wouldn't even think about that. The other context that I would be careful about this, is certainly for fair housing things. You don't want to, I would not recommend using AI, if you, and this is rare, but if you have a situation where you're qualifying tenants or owners or it's a co-op or something like that, you're making decisions under the Fair Housing Act related to reasonable accommodations. Any of those types of things, if you make, the wrong decision or AI makes the wrong decision there, that's based on a protected class, you could potentially have liability as well. And I can tell you those are very fact-intense situations that it's probably not going to be able to grasp all the different variables that are going to go on. And so when it comes to things like, hiring employees, making decisions on accommodation requests, or anything that's going to be involving a protected class or any types of screening, I would be pretty careful about using AI for that, because you may be well-intentioned, the AI may be well-intentioned, they may just have the unconscious bias built into it that could get you into trouble. Then the last thing that I want to talk about here before I kind of give you some final tips here is insurance. And so this is going to be a whole new ball game for insurance policies. And so the insurance industry, is evolving, to account for this because they don't want to have liability for bad AI decisions. And so the three types of insurance policies where this may affect, and you may see things start to pop up here, is going to be your general liability policy. For example, let's say AI, hired a vendor that had, a criminal conviction or something, and he burned down a condominium unit. And it, you'd put in a parameter that says you're only, allowed to hire somebody that, was licensed, insured, and had never been to jail before, or something like that. Certainly cyber insurance, I can tell you, the cyber insurance products have been around for associations for a while now. I can tell you that, at least in my experience, a lot of associations don't have them, even though they're available. But, if you're going to be engaging in AI use, you're probably going to take a look, at one of those, and then certainly D&O insurance as well. And that's kind of what we talked about fulfilling the fiduciary duty. And if a director gets sued for relying for AIs, they're going to be coverage there. So the insurance policies have started, to put various exclusions in. And so, before using AI, I would probably recommend talking to your insurance agent to figure out whether there's coverage, you need a different type of insurance policy or not. But one of the most popular exclusions is black box and algorithmic errors, which basically means that if AI gets it wrong, they're not going to provide insurance coverage. If it wasn't an accidental human decision, but ChatGPT screwed it up, that they don't have to provide a defense or indemnification for that, payment at the end. Another thing is pre-existing, conditions, that if you already, had some kind of, problem that had existed, is going to be a common exclusion, and AI may have provided you an answer and didn't necessarily know that, or that, this water leak had existed, for 2 years before making a claim. Intellectual property infringement. This one is a biggie, and it's kind of interesting. A lot of the cases have come out and said that stuff that's created by ChatGPT is not necessarily intellectual property. And it kind of depends on the degree of human input that's in there. And then also cyber tax as well. So, and that, like, those are all different things that, if you're putting information out into the public domain, asking AI to do this, that there may not be coverage for under your insurance policy. So certainly work with your insurance agent, figure out if you need to upgrade the insurance policy. If there's something that's excluded, then you need to make a business decision as to do we want to use AI, for these certain use cases, as opposed to being surprised that when you submit a claim that, you have this newfound exclusion in your insurance policy.
That was a lot, but very helpful.
Yeah. And then, so here's my final tips. I mean, I will tell you, me personally, I'm a big proponent of AI. I think that it's still in the initial concepts. It's not going to be like Skynet when you watch Terminator, that it's going to do everything for us. But I do think it has a lot of potential if used safely to make all of our running community associations, whether you're the manager, the board member, the attorney, they will be able to make you more efficient and easier as long as it's used in the correct way. And so kind of my tips, start with the safe use cases, know whether it's going to be closed source or open source. I'd recommend adopting an AI use policy. So that way, if somebody goes rogue and uses some kind of AI, that at least you have that in place as well, and put some parameters on that. And so it may be that you can't use AI for anything but X, Y, and Z, and specifically list that out is probably the good way to start, and then add to that. I think that will probably change over time as people learn how to use this and it becomes closed source. But in that policy, you may want to say only closed source use, not open source use. Or if it's open source use, it can only be for these specific different things. And I think that will give everybody in the community some good guidelines as to how to use that, the manager, how to use that, and make sure that everybody understands what's safe and what's not safe. If you have any kind of issues about whether you should be using this, or it's a safe case or not a safe case, based on the business judgment rule on those statutory protections, go out and get yourself a legal opinion, and that will cover you in that circumstance. It's really not, I think, as we've seen, it's great at summarizing the information, but I don't know that it's a substitute for legal advice. And like I said, I mean, there's legal products that are developing, and it may be able to get better at this, but I haven't seen anything that says that it works today and will give you that right answer 100% of the time. And finally, if you're going to be using it or you haven't used it yet, talk to the insurance agent and make sure that you have a clear understanding of what would be covered and what would not be covered, and if you should maybe add a cyber insurance policy. Or for D&O policies, for example, the package policy that's going to be cheaper probably has less coverage and more exemptions than if you were to buy a standalone D&O insurance policy, which is going to probably afford you more coverage. So, I would say have fun. Don't be scared of this. I would just probably, limit the uses, but certainly you have to start somewhere. So I'd start with some of these low level safe uses. And I think that, it's better to get ahead of the curve is my opinion on this. So, even though I'm a lawyer and I'm risk adverse, I'm probably not as risk adverse as an insurance underwriter, for example. So don't be afraid of it. Just make sure that before you use it, you know what you're getting into. And you start experimenting with it, with some of the low risk uses as opposed to the high risk uses, and knowing where the information could potentially go and not go. So that's my 2 cents on AI legal best practices. And I wanted to thank everybody at Condo Control for having me here today as a guest on their webinar. And I guess I'll turn it back over to Kim and we can open up if there's any questions.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Definitely could not have gotten all of that advice from AI. So thank you for attending. I'm sure there are lots of questions.
So now the trick is, I was actually at a presentation a couple of weeks ago, or a seminar, and I had Kevin O'Leary, who's actually from Canada, and he played 2 videos. One was the AI avatar of him doing the same speech, and one was an actual human recording. So now you can open it up and ask the audience which one of us was an avatar that was created by AI, and which 3 of the people were real here today.
Love it. So you have 2 questions that I think would be great for to get your input on, Kevin. First one here, I think you kind of covered it, but it's a specific specific one around AI use. So Nori is asking, will AI have the ability to confirm rules, whether they are compliant with the Condominium Act legislation that is used in Canada? As you know, each province has different legislation. It's the same case in the US. So what would be your advice on that? Is that an appropriate use, or is that a use where you'd probably want to get legal advice?
So my opinion as we sit here today is I would still reach out for a formal legal opinion on it. I think there probably in the next couple of years there will be legal-based AI or legal products, whether it's through Westlaw or some other company that will be able to do that. I can tell you that, for example, for the free products, I mean, I have created my own custom GPTs because I want to experiment with how accurate this is. And I will actually add all of the statutes in there. I will add the books that I've written, the Herzl's handbooks. And then I will just ask it, generic or general questions. And what I find is, right now it's still probably about 40% of the time it is missing some kind of key component that would probably, steer me in the wrong direction had I not known better. So I think that will eventually get there. It's really great at summarizing and finding things right now. And I think the next step that, it's going to evolve in the next few years is then going to be, more in-depth analysis. But at least what I've seen in the products that most people would probably use, or the free products, that it's not there yet. And so I wouldn't recommend that.
Okay, great. Thanks for that answer. Very quickly, we're just going to go, we're going to have more time for questions, Kevin, if you're able to stay on a little bit longer. But I do want to very quickly share a roadmap update for condo control. I just wanted to throw this in here. I want to talk briefly about recent changes as well as what's coming next for condo control. So a few things we've completed recently. First one, asset management capabilities and guest passes. So these are two features we've rolled out earlier this year. Both features are going to allow you to manage your community while increasing revenues. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out to your account manager and they will help you understand how that works. Second thing we've completed is a shift to what we call zero downtime deployments. So previously, as you know, we had maybe once every 2 weeks, condo control be offline for 20, 30 minutes as we make updates to the system. That's no longer required. So under most cases, it still has to happen here and there, but under most cases, we now can make these updates to condo control without disrupting your use. Next, very quickly here, 4 things that are coming on our roadmap that I wanted to share with you today. First is improvements to our Stripe integration. And important there is the ability to have flat rate ACH and pre-authorized debit payments. That is coming along with streamlined setup and reporting, all from inside condo control. So whereas previously you might have had to log into condo control and then log into Stripe, that's no longer going to be required. So that is coming. Really excited to roll that out. AI enablement, as we talked about, file library chat first, and then additional features are going to follow. So that's under works. And then last 2 here, accounting for small communities. Work has started on this, and we're expecting to have that rolled out before the end of the year. We've sort of played around with this before. We had a previous feature, and that's getting a significant overhaul based on customer feedback. And then finally, maintenance improvements. Again, we've heard your feedback on this area, and that feature is going to be reworked to address customer feedback, and we also expect to have that out in the second half of the year. So that is that's what's coming and that's what's new. I am going to pass it back here to Kim, who is going to moderate. We still have a couple more questions that I think Kevin can definitely help answer here. And so we'll go through some of those questions now.
Okay, so we have, when dealing with a new property management company, how can we legally carve out their ownership of the website and portal that they jammed, that they've essentially forced down? They don't like this website.
So I mean, website ownership, I mean, it really depends on who's going to be, registering that with GoDaddy, for example, or whatever your hosting program is. In my experience, most associations, I mean, there's two ways to do it. If self-managed associations or some that come to a management company, they are already going to have their own website, and they're going to be the owner of it, and then they grant access of that. Certainly on the management, some management companies, they will have their own completely, their own platform. And then the association will adapt to that, and they will use that. And really, in that circumstance, they're just getting a license, from the management company or whoever owns the platform or the website to use that. And so certainly what I'd recommend in that situation, if there's, I guess, kind of a dispute as to ownership, I mean, that's something you can certainly spell out in the management contract terms, to clarify that, on the front end. But no matter what side, especially if you're on the association side, you want to make sure that you'll be able to get any kind of important, data and things like that. My experience, most management companies are fairly professional, or if there's a change, or they go to self-management, they will work together, and try and have a smooth handoff. I mean, there have been situations over the years, I mean, we've had to get involved and either send a demand letter or even file a lawsuit to get, all that association's information. But, certainly, that's going to sort of depend on the circumstances, whether there was an original website, whether they're coming to the management company's platform, and then what the management contract says.
Perfect. So just clarification, someone's looking for, they use AI to create the first draft of their meeting minutes. Any minutes with anything wrong with that, as long as they do a final edit.
Yeah, I mean, as long as there's nothing confidential in there, you're not putting somebody's bank account information or anything like that, I see no issue with that. I mean, it still's got to come before the board, and you have to adopt it as your official meeting minutes at the next meeting. But that, I think, that was one of the safe, use cases, whether you're, recording it or even taking your notes and putting it in there. Generally speaking, that's going to be information that's going to be shared with the community. And so as long as there's nothing that's confidential in there, then there's no issue with that.
And we have, so this is for maintenance records. Are they available to owners for review?
So, you mean for
yeah, just general maintenance.
So generally speaking, most state statutes and most governing documents are going to allow for an inspection of books and records. In most cases, you have to state, what a proper purpose is. And so, certainly if it was a circumstance where it was maintenance records about, the common element or a specific unit that, that owner owned, I would certainly say that, that would probably be a viable request. If it's just, I want to see, whether the guy at my end of the hall that I have no association with, has pink wallpaper in his unit and he got a modification to, agreement for that. I mean, that's probably not going to be a legitimate request. I mean, I can tell you one potential use for this, if you have a closed source environment, and assuming you have everything, once again, this is, garbage in, garbage out, quality in, quality out. But if you literally had all of the association records, I know one thing management and boards struggle with is it takes a lot of time to compile all that information. And so if you had it and were able to put it in there that says, retrieve X, Y, and Z, that could probably certainly save time. You still do have to be careful that you are getting all the documents that would be responsive to that request. Because in some of these, it's, we have this information, we don't have this information, or this information really is responsive to your request, and this information is not. So it wouldn't be a good look if you just handed somebody 5,000 pages of documents when they were looking for the budget from 2 years ago.
Okay. And we are at time, so I think that is it. I want to thank everyone for attending. I want to thank our speakers for providing their time and knowledge. And if you like this webinar, you can definitely visit events.condocontrol.com to see what else is coming up, or give us a call. And with that, I hope everyone has a lovely lovely afternoon. Okay, goodbye.